Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Hello and welcome to the Insight Business Podcast by The Office Space, a monthly business talk series that brings together innovative entrepreneurs and business leaders to explore trending topics and discuss the secrets of their success under a monthly theme. Insight is recorded live at the Golden Age Cinema in Sydney's Surrey Hills, and all proceeds support the Sydney Community Foundation.
So in 1998, after a year-long study on the subject, McKinsey researchers declared a war for talent was underway. In the years ahead, they said organisations' future success would depend on how they could attract, retain and develop talented employees. So fast forward a decade, and I think we can agree that war for talent is still very much raging. So much so that in this environment, one of the original study directors, Ed Michael, said that talent is all that matters, talent wins. So to help us to understand the value of talent and also how to keep them and retain them, I've got three incredible experts. This is a really, really interesting topic for us as a workplace provider. So, and I think for everyone here, you must be on obviously either side of that equation, whether you're the talent, ones that are looking to attract talent. So let's get up our panelists. I'm going to start with Kate Messenger. I'm not going to do a huge intro because I'm actually going to get these guys to tell you a bit more about their career. But let me tell you about Kate. She's the director of Meme Partners, which isn't just funny cat videos and great internet. That would be really cool though. But it's a specialist consultancy engaging employees to put more into their workplace and to get more out of it. So please welcome Kate. Come and sit up here. In between, representing the men, we have Shane Curry. So Shane is the leader of employee experience within Deloitte's human capital practice, and he's a TED speaker. Have a look online to TED South Bank in 2015. So it's a really interesting. He's also a creative that has crossed over to the corporate side. So we'll hear a bit more about that. Please welcome Shane Curry. And Esther Clarahan, if I had $1 for everyone that's told me in the last month that Esther placed them in their first job, it's just incredible. She is one of Australia's most experienced creative recruiters. She's a confidant, a mentor and a coach to some of the most successful creative agencies. So welcome, please, Esther Clarahan. So first, I want to talk about your brilliant careers, each of you, and I'd love you to just tell us things perhaps that have driven you in your career, because Kate, I'll start with you. You also came from a really creative background. So tell us about your career.
Oh, you're so kind. I came from a creative industry. I started in corporate communications. And then sort of eventually brand. And I was working in the UK, in London, and then in various places in the US, working with internal audiences, so internal communications, but also with basically selling ideas to external audiences too. But I guess over more and more focused on those internal audiences, on the people who make the brands, the people who make the customer experiences, the people who make the businesses through those like day-to-day hundreds of decisions and choices that each of us make unsupervised. And that kind of magic of what made that work or not work became increasingly my focus. And then about 10 years ago, I started a little company called Meme Partners. Since then, I've had to explain meme a lot to people. At the beginning, people didn't even know the word. Actually, you had lots of fun guesses of what that, even how to pronounce that. But we focus entirely on employee audiences. So we look at what's happening within a culture. We look at the employee experience. We look at the existing culture to try to understand what might be holding people back. Why are people not bringing their whole selves, their whole brains? Why are they leaving their talent at home? Or just applying it to the things that they find interesting in their lives outside work, like their blogs or their cooking projects or their travel plans or their renovations. And why isn't it coming into the office with them? And then engagement strategies and communication strategies to try to help people see some alignment between their personal interests, their personal needs, and what the organisation is trying to achieve. That's what we do.
Being far too modest, like you were head of Ogilvy's New York PR and...
So, yes, I've worked with big firms like Ogilvy and Future Brand. But those were the dark days before I saw the light.
We'll get to that then. Shane, how do you follow that dark to light? Tell us about your career.
Goodness me. I did. I went the completely other way. I did. So I'll tell you how that happened.
Redeem yourself, go.
I studied fine art and visual communications, and that took me into a career in publishing and media. And I did that for almost 10 years, most of my time in London and San Francisco, and then back here in Sydney. And I actually was desperately trying to get out, but found it really difficult. I was a very niche designer, and I always had an interest in acting. So I put my name down on an extras agency. They called me a couple of months later and said, hey, we want you to be in this movie called Trapped, and it's filmed on level 4 at Deloitte. So I rocked up on a Sunday, did the part, and then on the Monday, there was a job advertised for a creative director at Deloitte. And I was looking for the really pointy end of design. I kind of had this interesting mix of being a kind of account director, but also a creative. So I kind of had a very pragmatic, but sort of open-minded sort of approach to my work. Anyway, I got the job. I got an interview with the chief marketing officer of Deloitte, and he was a journalist, so he sort of understood my background. And 13 years later, I'm still at Deloitte as a partner in the human capital practice. So I've had a very interesting journey and reincarnated myself a couple of times over that 13 years. I started as a creative director, then moved into consulting about 7 years ago, and really focused on embedding design capability into consulting broadly. And at the time, there was a big conversation around customer centricity. So how do I use my design skills to help our other organisations, I guess, realise customer needs? And then more recently, have kind of pivoted towards employee. And I think there's a much bigger theme in business around, I guess, that realisation that you can't deliver the customer experience without having the employee experience to kind of reinforce that.
So again, ahead of the curve. I love that. Now, Esther, for you, you've got to tell us the story of how you fell into this. We don't call it recruitment. Tell us about what you do.
Oh, well, when I started, we were called personnel consultants, and I hated it. So I'm really happy we're, talent consultants and recruiters and headhunters. It sounds much better. But I was working in an ad agency in Melbourne. I started at Ogilvy, actually, when I was 17, but I was working in another agency, and I looked around and there was no job above that I wanted, and I thought, well, I don't know what I'll do. So I went to see a personnel consultant and the guy who set up the meeting rang me afterwards. He said, how did you go? And I said, oh, not very well. I thought she was a bit idiot. And I couldn't believe I was actually saying it. And he said, why? What happened? He was a big cheese in another agency. And I said, well, she didn't listen to me. I think I could do a better job at that than she does. And I just said it as a complete throwaway, and it just changed the course of my life, because he said, you're right, and I'm going to make a call. And he rang the top recruiter in Melbourne at the time, and she offered me a job 2 days later. And then, worked for her and then started my own company 26 years ago, and I was 8 and very young, and it's a long time, and I've seen so much change. And there was the thing about my 25th anniversary last year, and they focused on all the changes, but but when I worked at a design place in Melbourne, I was in charge of buying the fax machine in the 80s, and it cost $8,000. And I bought a printer when I started my company 26 years ago from Apple. They made printers, and it was $2,500 and only printed black and white. So that's just, silly trivia, but there's so much that's changed. We've got websites now for candidates. We've got LinkedIn, and I love that it keeps moving. And what I started out doing is probably nothing like what I do now. I mean, the essentials are the same, but the tools and the method is completely different.
And I really love about Esther, I think I need you back on another panel about personal branding, because you are your brand, you are your business, and everyone in the industry knows you. It's really true. Everyone if you don't know, you're about to. And I think that's what's really exciting, that you identify as a creative, even though you're on the recruitment side.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it much, but I'm going to own that now. Yeah. And I like, because I don't identify with the personnel side of the business, the recruitment side. When people say, oh, you might know my cousin, she's in recruitment, I'm like, how would I know another recruiter? But if they say my cousin's in advertising, there's a good chance I would know them.
Well, let's talk about the war we had to have. In 5 years, 75 million baby boomers are going to be thinking about leaving the workforce. They're going to be over 55. And as they exit, there simply won't be enough Gen X to replace them. So it definitely sets a scene where talent is a commodity, and it really represents a prize that people are going to fight over. And they call it the C-suite's next wicked problem, which is this conundrum where you almost have to be stealing or attracting from other places. So I'm just really interested, Shane. I read so much of Deloitte's Human Capital. Every year they produce these fantastic human capital reports. Can you give us a report from, I guess, the front line? What's happening as far as your clients that you're working with? Are they struggling for talent?
Yeah, look, I think there's a couple of different areas that I think are kind of front of mind, and these are just projects I've worked on in the last year or two, is, as I mentioned, there's definitely a shift towards looking at employees as consumers. So they're really deeply considering the experience of their employees like they would a customer, right? And also the expectations that employees have now is of a consumer grade as well, right? So just in terms of their experience at work, I remember once upon a time you used to go to work because you had better internet there. Now it's the other way around, right? So as a consumer, I think we've had this great experience of this sort of revolution in the way that we behave as consumers, and I think the employees now are really disappointed with the workplace, right? So they're highly judgmental. A younger generation want much more meaning and purpose in their work, and so the pressure's on, right? And I guess when you work, a place like Deloitte really focuses on large organisations. So they have legacies, they have old technology, they have deeply ingrained cultural sort of behaviours. So it's a real challenge. So I think, broadly speaking, it's that sort of looking at employees like consumers. I think another one is, given the shift in industries, is learning is a big topic. So just what learning platforms or processes and systems are you creating around the function of learning? Because people are having to pivot very quickly into new roles. So that whole concept of just-in-time learning, in your pocket learning, right through from people from a blue-collar workforce right through to the white-collar. It's affecting everyone.
Yeah, and tell us about the product that Deloitte's a partner in with that, the learning platform.
Yeah, we've partnered with a platform called Edcast, which is a really great way of just creating a learning experience which is much more individualised. So it acts much more like a Facebook, and you can curate the content as an organisation, but you can pull content from like HBR and all the favourite places we like to get content from. And then you can also create sort of curated learning pathways, so depending on your role. So it's all just a lot more accessible and, consumer
and
grade customization. Yeah, exactly. So it's there's some really cool platforms like that. Yeah.
So Kate, you also work with some giant companies, so AMP, Visa. Tell us about what you are finding with those clients. What are they coming to you with? What are their needs?
Well, I think that some of the firms that we work with really are experiencing that kind of war for talent. Like a Microsoft, they're competing with a Salesforce and a Google and an Atlassian, and that's a real battle line. And it's about the employee experience. But I think another interesting piece, and because I think Shane's touched on that really well, so to sort of add a different thought to that, I think another piece that's really interesting is looking at how the clients we work with are being more thoughtful about their existing talent. So to your point about learning, I, as talent, want to be continually learning because I know that the talents I have right now might not be the talents that are going to get me my next job. But also as an organisation, I think that, obviously there are times where you have to go outside to find talent, but you have talent and they may not have the skills you need right now, but they're your talent and you can develop them and they want to be developed. And that's a great example of where the organisational and the individual alignment really works. And I think part of the reason this war is happening now is definitely about demographics, but it's also about the nature of work. So here in our economy, if it's a job that can be done by a computer, it's going to be done by a computer. And if it's a job that can be really kind of a repeatable process, you can give someone a list and they can follow it, it's going to be done in India or Malaysia. So the work that is here, the jobs we're looking to fill now, are a different kind of thing, right? It's those higher order skills that we need. It's critical thinking, it's complex problem solving, it's judgment, it's emotional intelligence. So the kind of people who are coming through our education system, which is a whole other topic, with those skills is actually not a big enough group to fill the work that we have. We're not equipping people well. And then the last thing I wanted to add on this sort of the question of the war for talent is I think that many companies have been incredibly lazy about unleashing the talent they have. They spend enormous amounts of energy finding people and bringing them in, and then they basically, I worked in New York at a firm where one of my consulting colleagues was Piers Fawkes, the P and F and PSFK. And he was I know he wouldn't mind me saying this, the laziest, least engaged, least useful member of our team. And eventually he left to start PSFK, right? This wasn't somebody who didn't have the talent that we needed. We just failed to get him to bring it to us.
I'm so excited to unpack that because there's so much in that. I'm going to jump to you, Esther. What's happening on the streets of Surrey Hills? Are agencies struggling to get talent?
It's a little bit different on the creative side of the advertising because the war's probably offshore, that it's now an almost rite of passage for young creative people to expect to go and work overseas now. Whereas it was, you guys have both worked overseas, but it wasn't a norm 20 years ago. Now it is. I think there's probably about 300 in advertising creatives in New York right now. Yeah. And then add to that the other places in the States, but also Amsterdam and London and, wherever. And my war, if you like, is how do we get them home? And, that's because the longer they're over, the harder it is for them to adjust. And also if they're used to a super high salary and making, Super Bowl ads and they come back here and they're given an Aldi brochure, there's a lot of adjustment in that. So I'm very mindful of that, and I keep going overseas, as my duty, and saying, come back when you're hot. Don't come back because this is a terrible thing to say, but don't come back and tell the industry you're back because your parents are getting old. They have to start putting a plan in. So it's not really a versus within the market. It's competing against New York and London and all of that. And then, and I'm trying to think, how do we get them home? Because there's shrinkage and job structures are changing. So it's, if they all rang up, if God forbid if there was another kind of disaster or something over in the States and they all said, I've got to come home, we actually would have a glut of talent and not the places for them.
Yeah,
so it's
definitely.
a bit different.
Yeah. And I want to come back to that motivation of how to lure them back as well. First, let's look at some reactive recruitment, because I think a lot of us get to that point where someone in our team announces that they're resigning and all of a sudden it's a scramble. So we're going to look at more upstream strategies. But first, if I can get really quickly from each of you, let's do a case study. So someone's account director has resigned and you've got to find someone. Where do you start to post that ad? Where do you go fishing for the talent? So Kate.
Well, I'm probably not the right person to take a crack at that one. Here, what I would say is, it's much better to find someone through the existing referral network of your team, right? I think the statistics, you would know them better than I, but I think it's something like 45% of people who are hired through referral networks stay, versus 20% of others.
It's interesting. Shane?
So to Kate's point earlier, I would be looking inside your own organisation. So I think it sounds like an obvious solution, but I think we often overlook the capability that you have inside. And obviously, internal recruitment is 1/6 of the cost. And a recent study we did at Deloitte last year, 54% of respondents said that it's easier to find work outside of the organisation than it is inside. Right? So they're so bad inside at doing the internal recruitment and movement and learning and development to help enable them to feel like they're ready for that role. And they could, I think, get twice as much discretionary effort out of them because they feel like they've been invested in the growth opportunities. So, I would look inside.
And to throw another Deloitte statistic at you, it's 30% is the cost of someone leaving of an annual salary. So for every $10,000, it costs $3,000 to actually replace someone just in lost resources. So Esther,
and probably more.
And probably more. Yeah. This is true. She's good, but she's... Tell us.
Yeah, I agree with internal. Sometimes I get apologised to by an agency where you go through a search and they come around and they say to you, we've decided to promote, Derek or Jenny or something. Yeah. And they're very apologetic. And I'm like, no, this is a great story. I don't mind doing the search if it meant that you focused on internal. Yeah. Always look internally first and then ring me. But no, joking. It's how you would go about it is, I think everyone should have their own network through their employees, through their own contacts, and something that doesn't happen very much anymore because of LinkedIn and websites and things is fewer and fewer people have the time to just see people on spec, and it's such an important part of building a network and PRing a company and a culture too. So if your door is open, a couple of hours a week to just see people who are out and about and looking and have those conversations, that can save a lot of heartache when there is a gap. And not enough people are doing that. And that's why there's so many more recruiters around.
And give us your comments on, we're going to move into technology. So automation, your great story about the dolphins. So tell us about how you feel about automation and technology coming into recruitment.
What was the dolphin?
The banana or the dolphin, we weren't sure what it was. I'll help you. So there was someone posted online, someone did a LinkedIn profile that was a dolphin.
It was a clam.
Okay.
That's why. I made it up. Someone did a LinkedIn profile of a clam sitting on the bottom of the ocean and got job offers. And they made it very clear they were a clam, but because of automated job searches, the clam kept getting job offers. Yeah, they did it as a test. Yeah, I thought it was a banana or a dolphin. I was wrong. Because people aren't using their eyes and their brains, and they're just doing industry. Once I did a placement where the company had been looking through a really big global network for a year, and one of the partners and I caught up, and he secretly showed me the document of all the candidates internationally, and we both looked at it and went, well, what good's that? And he said, what do you think? And I said, well, I know the person you should hire. It was a very important job. It's this person. And I only put one person forward, and this other massive company had 4 pages, both sides with sort of single spacing of, they just wanted to prove they were worth a lot of money by saying we've been in touch and searched for all these people. And I said, no, this is the one person that you should look at and saved a lot of time and got paid because that person got the job.
And I think outside of our own recruitment, that's when you do enhance that by using appropriate recruiters, relational recruiters, I would describe you. So like Esther, you've got access to all of these people in the industry.
Yeah, and I do encourage, I throw a lot of fish back that people come to see me and I try and sort out the problem that they've got in their job. Rather than just take them on face value and move them. And the other thing is when I'm talking to the management, I try and fix things for people so there is a pathway to stay. Because, it's weird. I know I should enjoy it when people ring me and say they're ready for another move. But I'm like, oh, really? Another 5 years? Going really well there. I like it when people have stayed a long time in a place and been a success. I don't like the flippers.
Yeah. Well, let's have a little look at trying to identify the right talent for the job, because Shane, you're the perfect example where you transitioned into a completely different role. And the World Economic Forum's Future Jobs Report 2017 says it's the human skills, like you were saying, Kate, like originality, initiative, critical thinking are going to increase in value with technology taking the stage. So also LinkedIn rates in order, the top 5 are creativity, persuasion, collaboration, adaptability and time management. So what do you look for, perhaps from each of you, in a candidate? Is it these softer skills?
I think, look, it really depends on the role, of course, but I think there's definitely a shift. I think we saw a shift in the last 10 years that went from IQ to EQ, right? And you could argue some organisations are still at the very beginning of that journey, right? So EQ. It's now about AQ. So the adaptability quotient that you have. So how well are you at adapting to different situations and I guess work environments and different problem solving. So what I would be looking at in a candidate is how well can you adapt? Because if you look at a place like Telstra, where they publicly announced that they're laying off 13,000 people over the next 3 years, that is purely a technology disruption. Right? Not only is the industry facing disruption, but the way that they deliver the work is changing. So how quickly can you pivot? Just think, how quickly could you pivot into something else? Because the thing is, everything's up for grabs. Everything, right? They are creating machines that listen to you talk and they'll coach me afterwards to say you shouldn't have spoken that tone to that person, right? There's places called narrative science. So quite now, when people look at data, it's up to the humans to make sense of the data, right? And we're like, that's safe because that's where the human come in, right? That's the EQ. Where machines are now feeding stories to you, a narrative based on the data. So you don't have to create the story anymore. It's telling you the story of the data. So I just think it's so important. Like I always think I'm cool because I'm a creative, right? And it's going to be safe. And every day I get blown away about what is emerging in technology. Everything is up for grabs. Yep.
And so for you, Kate, when you do go into these workplaces, what do you see in terms of the talent in front of you are the most valuable characteristics?
Well, actually, I think, agree with absolutely everything that Shane said. The piece that I'm often, if you like, focused on because of the nature of my work is how individuals are fitting into that system, to that culture, that ecosystem. And I think that some companies are over-hopeful about how much a few strategic hires are going to change their culture or their ecosystem. And one of the most damaging things I think you can do for an individual in their career or for the people, their new colleagues, that's to say your organization, was to bring in an individual who actually has no chance of succeeding in your organization because you want to be the kind of company that would employ them.
Yes.
You've read the list of what the skills are and you want to be that company and you're out looking for those guys. But you bring them into a big structure, a bank, even a big technology company where in fact, the tools aren't very, it's a big company. Things aren't cutting edge all the time. And if you bring in people who are going to be who are going to have expectations that can't be met by the company, not only is that person going to bounce right out again, but they're going to do a lot of harm to the people around them and to the structure.
It's the selection fit, isn't it?
Yeah. Being realistic about where you are now. Maybe 5 years from now, you can be that company. And certainly hiring the right people for where you want to be makes sense, but you've got to be realistic about where you are now.
Yeah, true. And I think it's interesting whether it's a top-down culture or if it's something that's brought from grassroots level.
Yeah, people come back from a conference and they said, oh, I saw these were the qualities we're looking for. Okay, but how many of those qualities do you currently have? And what would happen to someone with those qualities in your organisation? Would they go crazy?
Yeah. Maybe. And we're going to look at bad leadership soon. So Esther, tell us about, how does potential relate to past experience? And are you looking for character or capability when you're placing people?
I'm always looking at the potential, and I have to sort of see it as a forward move for someone to be able to sell it to them, because there has to be some sort of like stepping up.
And not just in pay necessarily.
Oh God, no. Yeah. Sometimes I might make them take a drop, but it's more of a challenge which extends the career path. And I don't think machines will ever be able to pick that, because it is a human thing. I think that again, it goes back to the interview. I think the problem with talent hiring at the moment is so many of the decisions are based on whether it's electronic or a PDF, whatever, but it's a piece of paper. It's not the human, and you get a lot more from the conversation than you do from. You can work out what perhaps someone's potential more than you can just from reading what they've done. Yeah. And my biggest challenge a lot of the time, day to day, is just getting people to put someone in front of them and not just judge them by what they've done.
Yeah. And I love it because it really comes back to that relationship as well, which is what you're determining. Now, we've talked about culture. I want to deep dive into this. Shane, tell us about Professor Ghoshal from World Economic Forum. So it talks about the smell of the place.
Yeah, my favourite guy. There's a really crappy video online that was filmed probably 15 years ago. And he talks about the smell of the place. And it's funny, whenever I get a culture project, I'll watch that again just to recalibrate my mindset. And he talks about us as humans, how fundamentally we don't change. We are still the same person. It doesn't matter where you go. I'm still Shane Curry now as I was at work and as I am at home. And he talks about culture is all about, organisational culture is all about context. So he tells a story about the south of France in spring. And he talks about it being such a delightful place, you just can't help but have energy and want to burst out and sort of, try and grab a branch in the forest because it's just got that feeling to it, right? And then he talks about, he's from Calcutta. And he said, Calcutta's a beautiful city in spring, autumn, and in winter. He said, but go to Calcutta in summer and it's like over 40 degrees and it's 100% humidity. And he goes, I feel tired in Calcutta, right? I feel like I don't have energy and I want to spend time inside. Now, he says, especially in large organisations, they're creating cultures inside that feel like downtown Calcutta in summer. Right? It's the smell of the place, right? It's when you look at culture, you've got to look at the rituals and the ceremonies and the behaviours that you are putting that person in the context of. And to your point, you've got to look at the organisational culture and the fit of the person, because you might want a creative or a pragmatic or a attention to detail person, and then you put them in that environment and it's not going to quite work. So I think that's what I love about what he says. It's all about the context. And you can tell as soon as you walk into a place, you get a feeling from it. And I love that. And I think that's what I try and sort of tackle.
So let's work out, how do we get that French Fontainebleau Forest.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
Kate, the ritual speaks exactly to the meme. Tell us what is a meme in the context of Professor Dawkins and
Okay. Sure.
and then how you actually create change in culture.
Okay. So, so the original term meme, before it was about cats, was a unit of behaviour or culture that's passed from one person to the next. So it was coined as a term to be a parallel to the word gene. So I pass things on genetically to my offspring. But you pass things on culturally to everyone around you. So if you go to work and somebody next to you is humming a really irritating pop song, you will go home humming that song and you'll pass it on to someone else. So it could just be a song. It could be a pattern, a habit. If you turn up at a company and you realise within the first 10 days that every meeting starts 10 minutes late, how long will it take you to learn to come late to meetings, right? So those habits, those memes include more complicated things like how we collaborate, how we respond to risk, how we provide feedback, things that make up the meat of a culture, the smell of the culture. So trying to understand what are those memes that might be positive in your organisation and the ones that are not helping your culture, and look at how do you promote the positive ones by shining a bright light on them and rewarding them and celebrating them and hiring for them and telling stories about them. And how do you isolate the memes and mindsets and habits that might be holding your culture back? And understand, well, why are they there? They're serving a purpose. A meme always serves a purpose. A meme is like, if you like, it's like a bacteria or a virus. It spreads because it serves a purpose, because it has a function. So if there's a certain pattern of behaviours, it's there to protect people, to protect them, or to help them feel good about themselves, or to help them go home feeling a bit better at work. Some of those habits we have are built as defence mechanisms. So to understand, well, if people are behaving this way, what need are they trying to meet? Can we meet that need in a more constructive way in our organisation? If people are gossiping, why? Yeah. How can we meet that need for connection, that need for information in a more positive way?
And I want to come back to how you do that with technology and also to the storytelling narrative. But Esther, for you, with your intuition about you're not just working out if the candidate's right, but you're working out if the placement is right. So how do you discern that the agency is the right fit for someone?
I won't work with some places. So if I can't sell it, I can't sell it. So that's true.
And how do you judge what the culture, the smell of a place is like?
It's entirely gut, entirely. And what you said about getting that job at Deloitte, going there for an acting job and just feeling it, and then applying for a job. That's a brilliant gut story. Like, I mean, a bit of luck was involved as well, but that gut was amazing. But I can, if I'm talking to someone after they've had a meeting, I can tell even before they speak whether they're going to get the job from the catch in their voice. Like, and then they launch into it. And I know, but I don't even have to hear what they're saying to know the excitement in their voice or the trying to say something positive voice. If they're trying to be positive about it, it's not a fit. If they just leap out, like in the trees of the south of France, then the chances are they've got the job.
Yeah. And I want to then look at, just staying with you, Esther, leadership, because you've placed a lot of different creative directors and account directors that have become positions of leadership. How effective is that versus kind of the average people that are working? I'm trying to work out where the culture smell comes from. Is it top down, or are you finding it's from the people that work in the space?
I think it's all through. I don't think it comes from. I mean, obviously, some of the decisions that affect your day-to-day work life, but
But I think if I was to, I don't think people ever leave a job because they don't like the play. It's always the manager. It's their direct kind of
I don't know
line.
about that. I think it's overwork and exhaustion, which may come from a manager, but it tends to be the whole place. I spoke to someone a couple of weeks ago who was very excited about their new job, and I said, "What do you like about it?" And the first thing she said was the dinners. I think she's got a problem and she doesn't even know it. So, So I think that if you're, because some places dress it up a bit, but it isn't. It's not. That's not a healthy place that she's working at. But she hasn't worked it out yet. So that won't be her personal manager. That will be just a chipping away at her life, that she finds she doesn't have a life left.
And we were talking about this example, and it's kind of something trivial that is quite unhealthy to keep people at work because you're serving dinner there. And for you, Kate, you talk about people are too savvy now to be fooled by gimmickry about workplace culture, because it almost has been this theme. What are the real meaningful changes to culture?
Well, one of the things I think is really that we are all talking about a lot at the moment is purpose, right, and meaning. And it's not just in a work context. I mean, it's sort of where we are in our wonderful, wealthy, happy society where we don't spend an enormous amount of time wondering where we're going to feed our kids. And we all get to be philosophers. We all get to ask ourselves, is this how I really want to be spending my time, And so I think that there is definitely an expectation of a certain kind of fulfillment. What I think I'm not as convinced by, and I realise I'm not sure how others might feel about this, but I'm a little dubious about the way we use the word purpose, as if you could only find meaning at Patagonia or Lush. And the truth is that some people I know, many people I know, are not primarily motivated by a big social cause as purpose.
Yeah. That's right. I was going to say that.
That's not everybody.
There's people I know work on Woolworths.
Yeah, and it's not that it's like a choice between either you are a purpose-driven person, which you should be, everybody should be, or you're something else. You're just worried about money and you're commercial. And because actually, I think people find meaning from different things. And when you look at sort of the basic principles of what motivates people, if you look at self-determination theory, for example, and you look at the core elements of what motivates any human being, autonomy. I want to have some control over what's happening to me. I want to have some control over what's happening around me. I want to have some choice, right? People derive a great deal of meaning from feeling that they are expressing themselves in their workplace. Relatedness, I want to connect to people. I want to feel valued. I want to like the people around me. I want to feel like I'm helping people. Some people are very driven by that, more than, say, by creativity. Different people are driven by different things. And so this idea of what really makes an employee experience worth having is not the football table or the sleeping pod. Go for it with a football table. That's awesome. But that's not it. What matters to me is, did I get to go home feeling like I'm a decent person, like I did something that was worthwhile with my time, and maybe on a good day that I grew a little bit, that I got a tiny bit better, a tiny bit closer to the person I want to be. That's what I want. Keep your football table.
Yeah. Totally. And I love it, Kate and I were talking about, it's not this existential idea, but it is a satisfaction. And Shane, with purpose, often we think that it's a millennial thing, but the baby boomers actually value it even higher. So talk to us about purpose and how you bring storytelling into that.
I totally agree with you. They say this concept of the rise of the social enterprise, and that we have to bring in this, deeping, meaningful social purpose, which I think is a broader sort of, I think more around corporate responsibility and conduct, business conduct. So you're just doing the right things, right? Not mentioning any royal commissions, right? Because I think it's more about that. But when you talk about purpose, like when you work with a client like the Transport for New South Wales, is they have people laying tracks. And you've got to describe the meaning and the purpose to them as a worker, right? And they get a lot of satisfaction out of what they do. So it's not an existential conversation. And, I was at a conference just the last couple of days where I kind of ranted on about that. It's just I think in the whole Maslow hierarchy of needs, we live in a wealthy country, you know, and a lot of those bottom layers are being catered for. So now we end up sitting around in circles in self-actualization mode of our deeper calling of why we're here. And I think we've kind of lost touch of just even the more practical jobs that are out there. And we live in these kind of, you know, crazy conversations in white-collar world.
And I think,
but yeah.
if I could build on that, I think that one of the things that's deeply satisfying for people is doing a good job, right? It's the same instinct that makes you want to, well, maybe no one here, maybe friends of mine play computer games for hours. Zero impact on the real world. No purpose, right? Pretty much no relatedness or connection to any other human being. But they're winning and they're getting better at it and they're doing it right and they're in that moment. And a good job should be like that, right? I should feel like, you know, it's Zen in the art of processing applications or whatever it is you do for a living. There should be satisfaction in doing it right. And one of the things that companies fail to do is make it possible for people to do it right. Right? They give them processes that are stupid. They give them tools that don't work. They give them, you know, impediments to getting to go home at the end of the day saying, I did a good job today.
And for you, Esther, with the candidates that you place, we were talking around it's the work almost more than anything.
I think creative people are most of all driven by making things, you know, seeing something to completion. And that's one of the big drivers of moving jobs is if they get into a rut somewhere and they're just not getting things made for whatever reason. And the purpose thing, I think, is in our business at the moment, it's been a fashion. And a lot of, like, the new students are coming through with portfolios that are, you know, apps that help dig for water in Africa. And they're getting reality kind of thrown at them because that's not going to pay their salary, that sort of stuff. It's sort of, that's your side hustle and it's your passion, and it's great if you've got heart and you've got the energy to go and develop things that make the world a better place, but you've kind of got to earn your living. And they were coming out of uni and colleges and things just with that sort of work when it was, you know, the industry is about selling things essentially, creatively.
Now, I'm conscious we're going to have some time for questions, but I'd like to end with you, Shane, because you often are dealing with mergers and acquisitions where you get two companies slamming together. How do you overhaul a company culture in the context of helping us if we need it to overhaul our own smaller businesses? What are the three things that often fall apart?
Look, I think the first thing is when you have a bunch of different organisations, so whether it be mergers or acquisitions, or it could even be a government agency that's merging with another agency, or it could be, for example, I'm working with the Faculty of Medicine and Health at University of Sydney. They're becoming one mega faculty, 15 different schools coming together. So where historically for 100 years, nursing has always been different to the School of Dentistry. So you have to kind of break down their sense of belonging and redefine it. And that's where I say purpose, but you know, you have to create that collective understanding of what their purpose is. And that's where I probably will use more of the human-centered design and co-design to do that, right? Often these mergers come together and in the executive room they decide this is the purpose. And I always say that's not your story to own, right? It's their story and you need to create that story with them. And that's sort of what I do with those merger and acquisitions. I create a sense of purpose.
A unifying purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, what's that unifying idea that sort of brings them all together? And then you've got to ask yourself, you know, there's a saying, you are the stories you tell yourself about yourself. And so what I critique an organisation's storytelling because the stories often will indicate the culture that they're reinforcing. So I'm a bit of a story auditor in the Deloitte world.
And then the second one we've touched on, which is culture, is often the part that you need to get right.
Yep.
And then just, you were saying enablement. So
Yeah.
actually how you put it together, which again, maybe Kate, you finish on how do you use technology to actually make these changes? Because it's all fine if it's a big purpose. How does that hit to the workers?
Well, I think one of the most important ways that technology is going to play out in the workplace in the future of work is we're going to have to find a way to connect teams when the relationship between employer and employee has become much looser, right? It's less long-term. It's often part-time or contingent or contract. 50% of the workforce in the US is now contingent, contract-based. We are heading in that direction too. And it's not just the kind of Ubers and Lyfts of this world. It's kind of professionals, it's consultants, it's people who are working 6 months here or a year here, or working as consultants in multiple places at once. And then even when you do take the people who are actually working for you at that time in some form, they're working in dispersed workplaces. They come into the office and they don't have a desk. They're sitting around, or they're working at home, or they're moving, or, so they're not even physically with each other. And then on top of that, you have more and more of a shift towards project-based teams, so agile workplaces. So there you have teams forming and reforming on a constant basis. So this sense of connection to my colleagues, my managers, is much looser. And if I actually am working for 2 or 3 different gigs or this one I know has only got 6 months in it and I'm already thinking about the next one, how then do you make me connect to that purpose? I was doing some work with a big, very, very cool company here. What I'm going to say is not super nice, I'm not going to name it. But they have a large contractor. A large part of their employee base is contractors, like up to about 30% at any given time. And this is top end of town, really prestigious place to work. They treat those people so badly, right? They don't come to, they don't get any training, they don't get invited to any events, they wear stupid badges that are a different colour to the badges everyone else wears. It's like...
organisations usually only care about the workers who are on the balance sheet. And there's a huge shift where they're now having to provide training, onboarding, like making sure the experience for the contingent workforce is as good as the full-time employee.
Because it's not 5% of your workforce anymore.
Oh, it's 40 in Deloitte as well. It's huge.
Yeah.
And then
that wasn't the company I was talking about.
No. That's 30. And then perhaps on a smaller scale, Esther, how is it what do you see companies doing right to engage their workers?
I think the big thing at the moment is flexibility, that embracing, because that ties into keeping women in the workforce, and that's probably the hottest topic in our business, is just trying to, diversity is a bigger story, but definitely there's identified a female leadership problem, and to fix it, it's not just a case of poaching women. Ogilvy put an ad out last year. It was like, a global ad, we're going to hire 20 women for creative leadership roles. It's just the wrong approach. They should be looking within, as you say, and looking after their people. And it's not just a case of poaching, it's a case of providing a place that women want to come back to work at. Not every woman is, needing, having children or needing the flexibility, but because there's such a male-dominated culture, that's off-putting as well. So it's not just about inserting women into leadership, it's changing the way they work. So that's probably the biggest thing at the moment, and it's changing so quickly, and it's really good. Like a few years ago, there wasn't a single executive creative director woman in the business, and now there's probably a dozen. And that's so that's a pretty big increase.
It's a good news
Yeah,
story.
it is. It's good. It's getting better.
I think it brings up a great
No more
point.
foosball tables.
No, I know. Clearly that doesn't work. But it shows that it's not just companies competing with other companies, but companies are competing against the individuals because they want to go out and start their own business. And often the stats show that they work longer and they earn less money, but it's the flexibility is actually the thing that's attractive. So I might throw it open to some questions. So is anyone straight up the back?
It's just a quick one in terms of retaining talent, is how to deal with the grass is always greener phenomenon. So it's, it's human nature, I think, to always imagine that the other thing is better than the thing we've got.
Yeah.
I think that applies to jobs as well. As a small business, how do we combat the pull, I suppose, the pull factor?
I think the fact is the grass isn't always greener.
How do you challenge that though?
Well, talking to people that, in different places, making your space a good space to stop that. But one of the other interesting things now is we're all on TripAdvisor for jobs now. There's apps like Glassdoor and Fishbowl, and they can be gamed slightly, like TripAdvisor can be gamed, but you can find the truths in it. So I think that kind of shuts down a lot of the grass is greener, because you read a bit about it and go, oh, same, nothing, it's not amazing. And I think places are much better now because of that, of having what's on the tin of your brand in the tin.
That's it.
Because they used to get away with lying more in interviews, and they
totally
can't now.
agree.
Yeah,
totally agree. And I think it's also about understanding what your value proposition is, like the employee value proposition, and then when you go to market, making sure that the fit of what you're promising and what the things that are really cool about your place is that's what they're after. And then because as you say, the grass might be greener, so it's more about getting making sure you're clear about what's the value proposition of working in your organisation. Yeah.
An aligned purpose between worker and workplace. And Kate?
Oh, well, I just think on a practical note, there's probably somebody in your team who has worked at each of the companies that they're currently recruiting from you. That's to say you have stories in your organisation, people who've chosen to come to you and who worked at the competitors at some point. And so just airing those stories, letting people sit around and talk about them. I think we tend to sort of shut down certain kinds of stories. We think they're somehow dangerous and we're right to be really thoughtful about the stories that we tell. But actually having people talk about why they chose to come here, having worked at the competitor, can really help.
I love that. Another question, one more. First hand up. Hi.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about big organisations. I run a small business and I'm at the stage where I get to think strategically about HR and reward and recognition and all of that sort of stuff, which is a brave new world. For people like me who are trying to work out what do we do and how do we make sure that all of the people that work in our business are happy and successful, what resources or tips or tricks or businesses have you found that we can kind of look and learn from?
I'm going to ask each of you, so how do you distill your big picture corporate into small business?
I think just try and keep the communications that you've got as a small company as you grow, because it's hard to manage that, but if you concentrate on that, because what happens in rapid growth is you lose those lines of communication, and that's where you drop people. So to me, it's about the intimacy of a smaller company is one of the attractions, and it's because people communicate more easily than in a large layered organisation.
I completely agree. I think that you have it's all the stuff that big companies do, and you can do it better, right? Because you don't have half of the problems that we talk about are because they're big companies. And those are problems you don't have to deal with. I think if I try to think of, well, what does a big company have to offer that it's harder for you to compete with and you need to work your way through? Learning is going to be a really big one. So that's certainly one of the reasons people choose to go to bigger companies, and one of the things that's harder for you to produce. But I think less so, more and more, there are actually tools and platforms that you can tap into on a sort of software as a service basis that gives that. And then the other thing is probably about growth. I think that if you can have a really grown-up conversation with your people about what it is that they want personally in their lives, what motivates them, and recognise that you might not be
their employer forever. And that's okay. And let's not pretend that you will be, but have a conversation about how you can help them get where they want to go. And you'll get so much more out of them in the time that they're with you than if you all pretend that we're just all going to be here until we're 65 together.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And Shane, last word.
Yeah, I guess there's two things. Is when you're recruiting, I'd be asking, how can this business be a platform for the problems that you're trying to solve, rather than the other way around? So we mentioned it a couple of times around how are you going to fit in that organisation? And I know one thing at Deloitte we're trying to shift even in our own recruitment is it's not about what you can give Deloitte. It's about how can you use Deloitte to get what you want, because that's what they want, right? You've got to use the platform to help you get to your next job, right? So think of it like that when you're recruiting. And the other thing is very, very simply, how easy is it to get work done around here?
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Because if you see anything that is a stupid process, that annoys people. And so, simple question.
And it annoys your best people most.
Yeah.
The people it doesn't annoy, you don't want them.
That's true.
That's a good note to end on, I think. Please thank my panel here. I think it's been so insightful. It shows that the companies that are winning the war are the ones that are prepared to invest in their people, to really think about their purpose and just to make in places that people delighted to be there. So we all have to work at some stage. You might as well enjoy it. If you have a look on the flyer just before you step out, next month we're putting the spotlight on the film business. So we do this one every year. It's super exciting. We've got Rachel Ward, Shannon Murphy and Alex White. So we've got an all-girl cast, and we're arranging also to screen Beautiful Kate afterwards, so you can get tickets separately to that. I think it's an 8 o'clock screening for that. So that's all part of the Sydney Film Festival. So hopefully you can see you there. Thanks, everyone.